The laughter inside the crowded martial arts gym echoed against the walls as dozens of spectators gathered around the sparring mat. Cameras were already recording. Phones were held high. Someone shouted that this would be over in less than a minute. Another voice laughed that the poor single father looked like he had wandered into the wrong building. Standing quietly near the edge of the mat was a broad-shouldered man wearing faded jeans, worn-out sneakers, and a simple gray t-shirt. His 6-year-old daughter held tightly onto his hand while hugging an old stuffed dolphin against her chest. Across from them stood the gym's undefeated black belt champion, smiling with the confidence of someone who had never learned the difference between confidence and arrogance. He pointed toward the father and loudly declared that today's match would be easy money. No one in that room knew the quiet man had survived missions most people couldn't imagine. No one knew he had spent years serving as a Navy SEAL officer. And no one realized that before the sun set, the loudest lesson inside that gym would have nothing to do with fighting. Before we continue, if you believe kindness is stronger than pride and that everyone deserves a second chance, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who loves inspiring stories, and subscribe to Ecoverse. Your support helps us continue bringing stories that remind us what truly matters. The quiet father's name was Barrett Rowan. Since losing his wife 2 years earlier to a sudden illness, every day had become a battle that no medal could prepare him for. He woke before sunrise, made breakfast, braided his daughter's hair the best he could, worked long shifts repairing industrial equipment, picked her up from school, cooked dinner, helped with homework, and somehow found the strength to smile whenever she looked at him. His daughter, Marin, had become his entire world. She never complained that their apartment was small or that they rarely bought new things. She simply believed her father could fix anything, because he always had. What Barrett never spoke about was the life he had left behind. Years of military service had taught him discipline, patience, and the terrible cost of violence. He had promised himself after returning home that his daughter would never grow up watching him solve problems with his fists. He buried every medal inside an old storage box. He never wore military shirts. Even his closest co-workers barely knew anything about his past. To them, he was simply a hard-working widowed father trying to survive. Marin loved watching martial arts classes after school because they reminded her of superheroes. She often asked her father whether she could learn someday. Money was tight, but Barrett promised that when things improved, she would have her chance. One afternoon they visited a local gym to ask about children's classes. The building was filled with trophies, banners, and loud music. Students practiced spinning kicks while instructors barked commands across the room. The owner proudly introduced his star fighter, a young black belt named Riker Vale. Riker was talented beyond question. He had won regional tournaments and built a growing social media following by humiliating opponents with flashy knockouts. Fame had slowly convinced him that skill made him better than everyone else. While Barrett quietly asked about class prices, Riker noticed his old sneakers and patched backpack. Assuming Barrett couldn't possibly know anything about martial arts, he made several jokes loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. The students laughed politely, unwilling to challenge the gym's biggest attraction. Barrett ignored the comments. He had endured insults far worse in places where mistakes cost lives instead of bruises. Unfortunately, Marin heard every word. She looked up at her father with confused eyes, silently asking why adults could be so cruel. Barrett simply squeezed her hand and smiled. He whispered that real strength never needed to embarrass someone else. Those words should have ended the moment. Instead, Riker walked onto the training mat and announced a public challenge. He claimed that if the single father lasted even 1 minute against him, he would personally pay for Marin's martial arts lessons for an entire year. If Barrett quit early, he would have to admit in front of everyone that he had overestimated himself. Barrett immediately refused, but he explained calmly that he wasn't interested in fighting anyone. The crowd misunderstood his refusal as fear. The whispers spread quickly. Some called him weak, others laughed. Several teenagers began recording because they expected another embarrassing viral clip. Marin lowered her head. She wasn't ashamed of her father, she was heartbroken that strangers were mocking the kindest man she knew. Barrett could have walked away. In fact, Every lesson from his military career told him to avoid unnecessary conflict, but then he noticed tears beginning to form in his daughter's eyes. This wasn't about pride anymore. It was about showing his little girl that courage sometimes means standing your ground without anger. He quietly agreed to one round. The gym exploded with excitement. People rushed closer, phones pointed toward the mat. Riker bounced confidently across the floor, throwing spinning kicks into the air to entertain the audience. Before the match even began, Barrett removed his jacket, folded it neatly, and placed it beside Marin. His movements were calm, almost too calm. Those who had spent time around experienced soldiers would have recognized that silence, but no one there had. The referee gave the signal. Riker attacked immediately with incredible speed. His kicks sliced through the air with precision that had defeated countless opponents, yet every strike somehow missed by inches. Barrett barely moved. He wasn't retreating. He simply stepped aside at exactly the right moment every single time. Within seconds, confusion replaced laughter. Riker attacked again, and again. Each combination grew more aggressive. Each attack met nothing but empty space. The audience slowly stopped cheering. They had expected dominance. Instead they were witnessing complete control. Barrett never threw a punch. He never looked angry. His breathing never changed. Riker's confidence slowly turned into frustration. Sweat formed across his forehead. He charged recklessly, abandoning technique in favor of power. That single mistake changed everything. In one smooth movement, Barrett redirected the attack using simple balance rather than force. Riker lost his footing and landed flat on the mat. The entire gym fell silent. Barrett immediately stepped backward instead of pressing the advantage. He even offered a hand to help Riker stand. The younger fighter slapped the hand away. Embarrassment burned hotter than any injury. Determined to recover his reputation, Riker attacked one final time. This time Barrett gently trapped his arm, controlled his movement, and lowered him safely to the ground without throwing a single punch. The referee ended the match, not because someone had been hurt, because everyone present understood exactly who had won. Silence filled the room before applause slowly spread from one corner. It wasn't applause for violence. It was respect for restraint. The gym owner approached Barrett, completely stunned. He asked the question everyone wanted answered. Where had he learned to move like that? Barrett hesitated. He had spent years avoiding conversations about his past, but hiding no longer served any purpose. Quietly, almost reluctantly, he admitted that he had served as a Navy SEAL officer for over a decade before retiring to raise his daughter after losing his wife. The room became motionless. Suddenly every joke sounded cruel, every laugh felt embarrassing. People looked at the quiet father with completely different eyes, not because of his military background, but because they realized he had never once tried to impress anyone with it. He had carried extraordinary experience without demanding recognition. Riker remained seated on the mat. For the first time in years, his confidence had been replaced by humility. He replayed every insulting word he had spoken. He remembered the little girl watching everything, and he realized his greatest defeat hadn't happened during the match. It had happened long before, when arrogance convinced him another human being deserved less respect based on appearance alone. The next morning, Barrett expected life to return to normal. Instead, someone knocked on his apartment door. Standing outside was Riker. Gone were the flashy clothes and confident grin. He carried only a small envelope. Inside was a prepaid membership for Marin's martial arts classes, not for 1 year as promised, but until she turned 18. Riker explained that he wanted to honor his word and make up for his behavior. Barrett accepted the gift only after making one condition: Riker would personally help teach beginners, not advanced competitors but children who lacked confidence, patience, or family support. If he truly wanted to become stronger, he needed to build others instead of tearing them down. Riker agreed without hesitation. Months passed, the gym slowly transformed, the loud boasting disappeared, students began encouraging one another, winning tournaments became less important than improving character, parents noticed the difference, enrollment doubled. Children who once feared failure now trained with confidence because instructors praised effort as much as victory. Marin became one of the happiest students in every class. She wasn't the strongest, she wasn't the fastest, but she always helped new students tie their belts and reminded nervous classmates that everyone starts somewhere. One afternoon, Barrett watched from the corner of the gym as Riker patiently encouraged a frightened young boy attempting his first lesson. The same man who once chased applause now celebrated someone else's smallest success. Barrett smiled quietly. Sometimes people don't Need punishment, sometimes they simply need the right lesson. Years later, during the gym's annual tournament, Riker stood before hundreds of families and shared the story that had changed his life forever. He admitted publicly that the greatest martial artist he had ever met wasn't the strongest fighter or the most decorated champion. It was a widowed father who refused to let pride control his actions. He explained that true warriors avoided fights whenever possible and protected others whenever necessary. The audience applauded, but Barrett simply looked toward Marin, who was now wearing her own black belt with humble pride. If this story has touched your heart even a little, please like this video, leave a heartfelt comment, share it with your friends and family, and subscribe to Ecoverse so together we can spread more stories that remind the world compassion is never a weakness. Special request: before this story ends, tell us in the comments, what do you think is the greatest sign of true strength, winning a fight or showing humility? As the evening sun poured golden light through the gym windows, Barrett watched his daughter laughing with friends, confident, kind, and fearless. In that moment he understood that the greatest mission of his life had never happened on distant battlefields. It had happened at home, one ordinary day after another, raising a little girl who believed that strength meant protecting people instead of hurting them. The medals hidden away in storage would always remind him of the man he once was, but Marin's smile reminded him of the man he had become. And perhaps that is life's greatest victory: not proving you're stronger than everyone else, but leaving every person you meet a little kinder, a little wiser, and a little more hopeful than they were before. Sometimes the strongest heroes are the ones no one notices, until their quiet character speaks louder than any victory ever could.